Hey gang, welcome back to Inverted Pursuits Laboratory. This week we're doing actually a quick bonus video here. This is kind of a video outside of my usual schedule. I released two videos actually last week, which was outside of my norm as well. I had the Little Nick 2.0 and Macy 2 build guides released, as well as my first of my egg timer videos with the LCD build. But today I was really wanting to discuss the durability of 3D printed rockets. I know a lot of people are constantly questioning how durable a 3D printed rocket actually is. And considering that's what I do, I thought I would do some quick show and tell. So I put together a little folder here for you guys to show you what I have been able to do with these rockets. First, I wanted to show you just a fun one. Opened on a different screen. But this is my good friend Morgan, her level 3 cert. First flight didn't go so well. Rocket's completely intact here, which is kind of incredible. She took like a 1-foot core sample. Actually, it was almost like a 2-foot core sample. But you can actually see right here, this is one of my camera shrouds that I gave her for the flight. I printed a special one in black for her because she didn't really want to paint it. So I was just kind of doing her a little favor here. But you can see the dirt comes up and there's dirt on the camera shroud. So like these things can take quite an impact. There was a crack. You can actually see the line right there. There was a crack in the print there. This was one of my early prototypes that had some flaws in it. She was actually test flighting it for me since I hadn't had a chance to get this particular model out to fly. But these are incredibly durable pieces that you can fly. This came in ballistic. It's amazing the rocket's intact. The ground was just really soft. But like that camera shroud was buried down in here somewhere in the ground and was completely intact. Let's see. Where else do we want to start? We're gonna start with a fun one. So I have the rocket Fire Drake. It's an orange rocket. That wasn't very helpful. So in this footage, we can see like here's what happened when a rocket actually hit a tree. Like this thing came in flying through the canopy and impacted the branch right there, and it was in shards for about 10 feet of just pieces we were picking up. And I mean, this thing impacted a tree while still accelerating at some considerable speed, and that broke it. That was like the only thing that broke this was its like deadly impact with tree. Then on, well, I guess flight 2, we got back was Fire Drake versus a Combine. It actually came in completely fine and then got run over by a Combine when the field was being plowed. So that actually did really well. But my worst flight of Fire Drake was this one. And I took a core sample myself. It was about 4-inch core sample. It just completely dropped out of the sky. My shot cord had some issues. It was before I swapped to using Kevlar shot cords instead of nylon ones inside these rockets. Anything you were to buy from me now comes with a Kevlar shot cord. Has been thoroughly tested, where like I taped the nose cone shut and was setting off charges in there to try and melt the shot cord that ties off right in here. But this thing was buried 2 to 4 inches in the field out here, and I just saw it sticking up like a stalk. It came in ballistic from about 1,200 feet and is perfectly intact. I still fly this one to this day. It is still intact. It's flown about 6 or 7 times. I think its highest flight now is just over 2,000 feet, just to make it go ridiculously high. I do have an AV bay that I've designed for this to be able to put a small tracker in it with a Marco Polo so that I can go chase it. But it came in quite ballistic, and everything was just fine. As you can see, there wasn't any bit of damage. I didn't have to do any repair to this. Now, to make a quick change from our normal, we can go take a look at what happens when they break. So we'll start with Sentinel. This is one that I have crashed fairly regularly. This particular mistake was actually it broke in air. I had a delay charge set wrong, and so it deployed on the way down. But you'll notice that the break happened right at the threads. That's almost always where my breaks happen on my 2 larger rockets. I rarely see failures in everything Fire Drake size and smaller, so basically my 24s and downs. And if they have broken, it's been asphalt impacts. But on this, you can actually see that the threads just sheared off on me. If I get forward a little bit further, yeah. So you can see that the threads sheared off. Now to fix this, all I ended up doing was taking some CA glue and gluing the thread piece back on, and I still fly it. I do this regularly with all of my rockets, and I'll just glue the threads back on, or I'll just glue the pieces together. I usually tend to not glue my threads in because I like to be able to take them back apart and make them longer, make them shorter, and change out parts. That's part of the fun of having them be screwed together. And like here is a screwball flight that I went after it, and you can actually see it broke. I'm assuming it broke on impact on this one. I didn't actually have camera footage of it. But again, it broke at the threads where we impacted. So again, all I've done on this is I took CA glue and glued this all back together. And it worked just fine. One of the current rockets I fly right now, I had a misprint where it skipped like 2 layers and then continued to print. And so the body tube broke broke in half when I was trying to get it off the build plate. And I CA glued the body tube back together and have flown it twice. You'll actually see it upcoming here. But this was one of the first flights of Screwball. The walls were a little too thin here, is why it broke. It should not have broken, and I have since changed what I include in the kit for that reason. So we can see that like the nose cone was perfectly intact. The other place it tends to break is this line between the nose cone here, because the nose cone will hit really hard. An easy way to fix that is just to put a bolt in it. It's also an easy way to weight it. There's a little 1/4-20 hole spot where I've drilled it out a little deeper and put a 1-inch bolt up it. That's how I currently fly it to keep it held together, because I've broken these apart too many times. I've never decided to glue it together because I really still like having this be able to come on and off, but I keep gluing the threads back on. All right, let's take a look at its intact flight from Airfest 28. So I found someone else's rocket. And so here we come up on Screwball. Now, if we pause right here, you can actually see this line in the body is that broken print I was mentioning before. So the print broke off the print bed for me, and I glued it back together, and here it came down completely intact. And you can see that it worked just fine. You can also see the nose cone is intact, and it's been glued back together at least 3 times by this flight. I didn't record every single flight I ever did just because I didn't see a point in recording all of them. And I believe this body section as well has a glued back on threaded section, because I don't like to throw away things that I think are still good. And I also, on my own stuff, like to see how far I can push it before it shreds off the rail. And so far that has never happened, and I have a good feeling that our wonderful prefects out here at Cloudbusters would not let me fly if they thought I was going to do that. But we see it happen all the time. And so this was then a flight or 2 later in the day, and I had a lot of damage from this flight. My parachute didn't deploy is the main problem. But we can take a look, and you can kind of see here on the nose cone there's a light gap. So my nose cone actually broke off again, and you can see there's another body section with the added, or that's glued together in the middle. It broke not there. It broke down here. Is where that section broke off at. Yeah, the parachute's all tangled up, so it didn't want to unfurl on me. I've flown it again since and used a different parachute because I didn't like that one didn't undo itself. Rather upset me. On this one, I also broke the fin can. This was my original prototype fin can, and so it just did not survive. But it just broke that section off, and that's a section that had already broken before on me. If I remember correctly, I was also flying an inferior motor piece. I was flying, a lot of my original prototypes had thinner pieces, and I feel like I'm making a lot of excuses for these rockets when they break, but I'm flying a lot of my original prototypes, and sometimes I mix and match parts and forget that I'm not flying the most up-to-date version of things. Here's some footage like right after the crash of Fire Drake, the first orange print I have when it hit the tree, just seeing like how it shattered. But pretty much the only way these smaller ones break is if they hit asphalt or hit a tree. They don't break very often. They're ridiculously sturdy. And if they break in such a way like this one down here broke, where it just snapped in half, I'd fix this with CA glue and call it fine and take it back out and keep flying. Also, here's an image of the AV bay I use for putting a Marco Polo in. I've never actually put these for sale on my website. I'm thinking about adding them. They're just big enough to fit a Marco Polo. They don't quite fit an Egg Finder Mini. So like that may need to be adjusted just so they can fit an Egg Finder Mini. So I'm starting to use that more often. But let's jump back to in person and let me show you some of the cool things that we can do. All right, so now that we're back here in person, let me show you some things that I've got floating around the shop here. So this is my original screwball. I have replaced the fin can because I broke the original one, but you'll see even in this fin can, there's a flaw right here. There's a layer missing, and I haven't even bothered to like CA glue it back together because I don't think it's actually an issue. I'm flying it this way. I don't ever sell them this way. If I find an issue like this, I keep it back, and it usually goes into my prototype reserve for things I'm going to fly in the future. Now, as we come up, we can see here's that body tube I glued back together, and you can see the CA glue all the way around. There's even some dirt in it from when I did the job. And then I'm actually flying another one. I print these in pairs usually, and so since I'm going to be trying to do this as a dual deploy prototype, I've actually got another one of these that's been split. I've also got the top nose cone here, still needs to be replaced. But let's jump through my shop. This is kind of the new setup. Some of you have seen this, some of you probably do not care. But we're coming over here to my storage area real quick. Lighting is awful, and I understand that. Network extender. But this is my box of bads. And like by bad, I mean they're fine, but I always keep them around. Here's the original fin can I first printed, and it broke on me. It could still be fixable. I just chose to retire it because it's really cool to look at, but you can see the failure was right there. And so I didn't want to bother with trying to fix it. But what we're looking for real quick is my nose cone tip, which should be in here. Because I've done a lot of glue up. I mean, here's one that I left broken after I broke it. I actually broke this out at Airfest on one of my test flights. So you can see that it shattered a little more than normal because it had been broken before. So like I got a shatter all the way up there as well. And so I took a huge chunk out of it. So I decided it was time to retire that one rather than try to keep flying it. You can actually see one of the threaded pieces down in here. This is the one off of this guy right here when I broke. I used to actually have an Astro Cam on this. I now tend to fly a full Mobius, but I could glue that back on with no problem, but that's one of the early prototypes, and so I don't really want to keep using it because there's no point to keep using it. Those are actually good parts. Here's another broken one that I've broke, and I've chosen to leave some things broken more recently, just because, but I'm really well known out at the Cloudbusters field for taking these rockets and crashing them and being back on the pad in under 15 minutes. So, like, this all lines up right here, and as you can see, it lines up really well. So, with a little bit of CA glue, I can make this go back together, and let's get under light so you guys can see. Like, you'd be able to see the seam, but it would be held together just fine. Now, another option is always to CA glue the threads together on my bigger threaded projects. Let's try the other bin of scraps. Here's that fire drake that hit a tree that I did a while back. Red Hawk prototype. Here's one that I've broken several times. You can actually see I broke it there. I used to try and glue all the rockets together before I went 100% screwing. This one's actually completely glued on. I wanted to see how it worked before I did it. But I went this whole route of trying to make these rockets as reusable as possible. Because for me, it was always quite frustrating to fly a rocket and risk losing it. Risk never getting it back, especially ones I liked. Like, I had an old Max Trax that I loved, an old one that looked, in my opinion, a lot like a missile. And I really liked my Estes rockets, and I was scared to lose them, scared to damage them. And I found the same thing even with my level 1 and level 2 cert flights and other things that I've built, is that there's always the risk of losing it, and then you're out whatever the cost of the rocket is. What I love about my 3D printed rockets is I've crashed Screwball, or at least broken apart on Screwball, in almost every flight, but it's never stopped me from being able to fly more than once in a single day. My record for flying Screwball on a single day is 3 times, and I broke the first 2 flights and succeeded on the third one. Like, there was nothing that stopped me from being able to get back on the pad. With a fiberglass rocket, if it crashed and broke, it's 2 months of rework and rebuild, and that's just agonizing to me to go out there, get a damaged rocket, and you see people heartbroken all the time from all this work they've put in to get a damaged rocket back. But what I've got here are rockets that you can damage and go, oh, cool, I got a bottle of CA glue, let's go. And like, you're back on the pad in 20 minutes if you know what you're doing. Again, I've said my quickest turnaround was 15 minutes from getting back from recovery to being back on the pad, just tossing some CA glue on there and letting it go. Now, for those of you that don't understand, these rockets are printed out of PETG. CA glue forms a chemical bond with PETG. It's part of the weird chemistry mumbo jumbo I don't remotely understand. All I know is it basically fuses them back together. Now, yes, you do have a more likelihood of breaking along that same crack line, but I've rarely done that. I usually have some other part of the print fail where like layer adhesion didn't work very well. And I just find great comfort in flying, knowing that if I break the rocket, no big deal. The fears of flying a rocket are what I was trying to eliminate when I started doing these 3D printed rockets for myself, and what grew into Inverted Pursuits Lab. And so I hope all of you will enjoy having learned a little bit about what built IPL and what these 3D printed rockets can actually do. There is so much versatility with these rockets in how you can build them, what you can design with them. Like, this is my newest design, and it is actually stable. Amazingly enough, I've tested it, but they are so much fun. Hopefully you will take a chance and go look at the link in the description below, check out my website, see the rockets I've got there, and maybe you'll consider picking one up yourself, or you'll see me out in the field and be interested in chatting with me. So I'll see you all in the next video.